All right, so in part two, we move into the crossbar here. So we look at what's behind and the magician. The magician to me is a conduit. The magician to me is that moment when you're creating or making or doing any kind of work where the self disappears into the energy. If you've ever had an experience when you're painting or writing or cooking or whatever you playing music or whatever it is you do that you love with friends with a lover, when yourself when your sense of self goes away, your sense of control goes away, and you realize that you've just become a a conduit for the flow of energy, like an electrical cord in a way, and it's just flowing through you. So what's leaving, sort of what's moving forward, or I'm passing, is the sense of the magician, is that sense of having been a conduit, of having created, which is true. And just to sort of show you that that's true, I just a month ago or so left my MFA residency for the summer. I'm in an MFA program. We meet in the summer rather than during the school year, and this funk that existed started uh, about the time I left. And I think partly it's the sort of mourning of leaving this behind because it feels really good. And being a major, of course, it's a transformative experience. It's big, and we do have some majors in this reading, which is really interesting too. There's a lot, and they're big ones. So that's what you're moving away from. What you're moving away to, or what you're moving to, is really interesting because the Hierophant is a card I frequently resist emotionally because to me it indicates institutionalism in a way, which I resist because it's my natural inclination to be subversive, and having gone from the experience of my MFA program back to work, the work influence, even though I love what I do, is not as fun as making magic. So the banality of real life is forming into this. Now, this is still a major. This particular major, this particular incarnation of the Hierophant fascinates me because what they say in the book is that he's sort of the guardian of tradition. He's sort of the guardian of experience, of culture. He, in his sort of light box here, keeps the mysteries of the world, of religion and whatnot. But I still do think of this as institutionalism, and so the influence here goes from kind of being a sole proprietor in a way, a sole celebrant, a sole practitioner, into being making yourself subservient to a greater whole, an acolyte of something bigger. You were the guru here, but now you're under the influence of a guru. You were the leader of the pack here. You were the maker of everything. Now you're part of something larger. You're part of a group. You're part of a tradition. So we flow in this case from the romantic attitude of the magician into the push back to work and becoming part of an organization again. But it's I have to let the fact of my bias against papalism, right? I mean, anyone who hates the Hierophant hates it because they probably grew up like I did under the influence of organized religion, and they combat against it. But many artists over the years have tried to neutralize that, and I think that the authors of the Fountain Tarot have, because there's nothing negative about that image, and there's nothing really negative about, say, Rider Waite Smith's image. It's just there, and our own biases come into it. So the influence moves from being kind of a master, being kind of a magical creator, a magical being in a specially sacred space, to becoming part of someone else's space, into an institution, into something bigger than yourself, and work. And so these things seem to be working together really interestingly, and that feels right. That feels appropriate. So That sums up quite a bit the state of my experience right now. And even thinking about where I'm going professionally and creatively, I will, in the coming months, be under the influence of others. I won't have the autonomy that I had. I'm going to have to make myself part of an organization, which isn't my favorite thing to do. So now we get into the staff here. Put our good friend Death back up there. Um, the anxious person in me freaks out when I see that card, except I never interpret it as literal death for other people. When I do it for myself, I'm like, oh my god, it's the end of the world. This represents my attitude toward, is that what it's, I have to go back to Mr. Waite here, the seventh card. Signifies himself, that is the significator, whether a person or thing, and shows its position or attitude. It's a strangely hopeful card, given the fact that I've been in a bit of a funk, so it's curious. I guess it makes sense in that I am kind of a reluctant optimist. I wonder if I were using reversals, if this would come, reversed. Because I feel like there's the potential in that, but more cups influence. So there's kind of the sense here that underneath all of the struggle is a sense of optimism, of hope that things can feel good and that the best is possible, which I can reluctantly say is true. I do feel that way frequently. I don't like to admit that to myself, but I frequently do have a hopeful attitude towards things. And for all the thing I've been saying about being in a funk, I feel like that's true, but I also haven't been hopeless about it. I've just been sort of generally feeling conflict, And I think it goes back to this combo here, which is the sort of desire for everything to be lovely, but knowing that you have to get shit done, basically. Card 8 represents our house, our environment. So for all, we get another wands card, again, this sort of combination of wands and majors. In fact, the only suits that show up, cups, wands, majors. That's it. So the environment around me seems to be really creatively possible. So there's a lot of energy around new work happening, around work getting done, around the ability to channel the energy of fire and to make it productive, which is a good thing. I think the ace reversed or upright in this case is a positive thing. But it's a very immature card too. It's the beginning of a suit. It indicates the start of something. And that's sometimes irritating when you've been working at something for a long time. You don't want to start at the beginning of a project. I think about I can't remember what writer said this, but I don't like writing. I like having written. That's sort of the experience. This says the environment around you is really pushing you to start new stuff. And again, get work done. Get work done. You know what I mean? The fire energy in this reading is really important. Get work done. Hopes and fears of the moon. The moon for me is interesting because it is a card of theater, which is kind of my field in some ways. And I think the reality of this card for me is its lack of reality, is the fact that it indicates shadows. It indicates things not being exactly what they seem to be. It indicates a lack of trust. It indicates mystery. And so I think that's appropriate. You're both drawn to that as a person, or at least I am drawn to the sense of the sexiness of the unknown and things being a little secretive and a little shadow. But at the same time, it's irritating because you want all this light to show you what the reality is and to show you that people are what they say they are, So the moon energy here seems to be both sexy and irritating. And again, hopes and fears. You're hoping that it's going to be really a sexy experience. You're hoping that it's going to be really good. You're hoping that life is going to give you those things, and that there's something magical at work, and your instincts are working, and things are going really well, and you're feeling this animal pull. But at the same point, people could be lying to you. They could be deceiving you. They could be telling you what you want to hear, and so there's that. And then finally, the outcome. is death, which I generally have started to interpret as a falling headlong into the unknown, which could easily have fallen in the hopes and fears here. It's transition, it's a change, it's a big ending of something. It's facing the unknown. So I think that's an interesting life lesson. It's not something I particularly enjoy, but the reality is that everything's always a question mark. You just don't know. So I think that that's what that says. You know, you're going to have to face the fact that anything could happen. Um, so if this were a reading for someone else, I'd probably pull another card just to make them feel better about landing on, you know, the ultimate scary card, I think. So let's just do that for me. And we get the Four of Cups. So what I would say to this is, it's not a particularly happy card either, but I would say that it indicates a sense of discontentment. So, you know, for better or worse, you're going to have to make changes. I think maybe that's what this is saying, is like, you're going to have to make changes because, you know, whatever's going to take you, where whatever's happening is going to involve you having to be active. You're going to have to get work done. You're going to have to be a little practical. And go out there and hunt for the practical stuff. So, not an outcome I would particularly want to get. It does indicate some, you know, some ending. It indicates some discontentment, some irritation with feelings. But that feels like an inevitability in life anyway. So that's the Celtic Cross. In a way, I haven't really used it before. Is it all that useful? You know, I don't know. I've got a couple minutes left before the time runs out, before I can post this video. The thing that bugs me about it now still is what always bugged me about it, which is that you get an outcome card. It doesn't really give you a whole lot of advice about what to do. So I get a lot of sense of energy here. Like, this part's kind of useful. This part really made sense. The staff doesn't so much. You know what I mean? And outcome cards are always sort of irritating to me because it's like, well, what do you do? And what you do in my case is you face the fact that everything's an unknown, things are going to end and change, and it's going to, you know, make you irritated sometimes. So is this a helpful reading? Ish. You know, again, this part was really helpful. This part, not so much. It, you know, it's not necessarily something I would go into. I guess if I wanted to impress people with how much I could see about their life, maybe I would do this, because this does sort of accurately depict where I'm at. This, not so much. This isn't what I was expecting to see. This is true. This is inevitable in life anyway. You know, I mean, it's just how things go. So, you know, the outcome of life is always endings and changes and transitions and going into the unknown. I mean, that's all we do in life, is we spiral into the unknown. So we look at readings in order to sort of help us make sense of that. I don't think this particular reading did anything to make me say, oh, gee, I feel a lot better about this funk that I've been in. I could be optimistic, if I'm going to be this latently optimistic, and say that the funk will end. You know what I mean? If I look at these two cards, I could say, you know, here's the funk that I've been feeling all along. You know, something's going to end. What's going to end? I pulled this card. Where am I going to go next? Into a Knight of Pentacles mode, which means that I'll transition from this guy into this guy, you know. So I'll have a much more practical attitude once this funk ends, once the sort of sun comes up. Which is nice, I guess, but that doesn't necessarily tell me how to get there, even if that were true. So, anyway, that was an interesting little experiment. Didn't go quite the way I expected, but I thought it's interesting. And I hope you enjoy it.